Yeah.
Yeah, I went back on the hunt. Maybe I'm looking on the wrong tool, maybe there's something else, or what back and look. Because I remember, because I went back and I found the originally.
Somebody
showed
told me
that
that the other
page,
day, I
so
thought
I
it was
knew
funny.
it.
So then I called all of my
I knew I was
relatives
missing
up in New
something, and when you
England.
mentioned
already
it,
heard
it
it?
dawned on
No,
me, so
they
I
didn't know
went back
what
and
that
looked.
was.
I don't know if they removed
They don't
it
use that
off.
word over
Probably, yeah,
there.
I mean, they revise it
So
periodically.
they didn't know
Okay,
what
so
it
maybe they
was.
took
It's
that
kind of
component
Yeah.
off. Okay.
Still, when I put like shoppers on VMS, I know, I'm gonna have to go back and change it, because I know it's wrong to put 158, because
I
that's what
found,
the.
I figured out all day and how to fix that.
Oh, okay.
Finally, but it took me all day to figure it out.
Okay.
But it's
Sounds like
figured
she's
out.
bragging.
Oh, no, that's gonna be a headache. I have to go in there. It's a pain in the butt. But
Oh.
finally,
Okay,
nightmares.
okay, good.
Would you mind explaining this to the group today?
No,
I didn't want you to think I ambushed.
oh, no, you mean,
Just go through my mind, and particularly this and this,
okay,
you know, how all that relates.
okay. Okay, well, hang on, let me go get one more thing that will help. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning. Morning.
Turn the light on, it's better.
Oh, hey Shelley.
Good morning, everyone. Hi.
I don't know if he's,
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
I don't know how that's gonna work. All right, we're gonna go ahead and, we have a quorum, so we're gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we'll just accept Commissioner Dobson, once he arrives. We're gonna go ahead and commence our regular meeting scheduled for 9 a.m., March 9, 2022, here at the Brunswick Housing Authority. We're beginning with a moment of silence, led by a prayer by Commissioner Pastor Nickerson. Bow our heads for a moment of silence.
Oh, Father God, we thank you for another opportunity to first do the work that you have called us to do and fulfill the purpose in this community. We thank you for this great organization, the Brunswick Housing Authority, the board, the executive staff, all of the staff, and our residents. In this great community of Brunswick, Georgia. God, I pray that we operate in love, unity, and peace on today as we move forward to bring about the change in our city as well as this community and be a blessing to this community. Father, I thank you for blessing this meeting today. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. Okay, I will entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
We approve the agenda that is drafted and under consideration.
Second,
Got a motion by Commissioner Kilgore to accept the agenda as drafted and seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same. Motion passes. We're going to begin with, I guess we have a delegation, which is Ms. Rochelle Patton, or as I know her, Shelley from the conferences there. And we'll have a brief presentation about further educating the board there on what we could potentially do if we decide to reposition.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yes,
make a point of order, please?
yes.
I saw Reverend Zach Lyde in the lobby when we were coming in.
Yes,
Can we invite him back and
Is
otherwise
he
avoid
not?
the wrath of being accused of excluding him?
is he not invited in?
I guess he's out there because nobody has invited him.
Yes, please, let's please invite,
Thank you, sir.
Reverend Dr.
know I get blamed for it, so, you know.
Understood. Commissioner Dobson? We have already approved the agenda, and we're about to have a presentation from Mrs. Michelle Patton, Collaborative Housing Solutions, which of course was in your packet. You want to do the honors any further?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, we're ready for you there, Ms. Patton.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is well. So it's a little hard to hear you all, so if I don't hear you clearly, I might ask again, so I'm sorry for that in advance. Okay, so my name is Rochelle Patton. I'm the founder and principal of Collaborative Housing Solutions. We're an owner, developer, and consultant of affordable rental housing. I'm based in Decatur, right outside of Atlanta, but I do work all over Georgia as well as all over the Southeast. And some of my consulting work on the RAD side takes me all over the country. So I work with lots of different housing authorities like yourselves, as well as developers, and do development on my own to help housing authorities walk through the process of going through asset repositioning. And so today I was asked to share a little bit and educate a little bit about the RAD program. And so I just have a few slides. Do you all have that up, or do you want me to share the screen, or what would you like?
You can share the screen if you like. That'll be fine.
Okay, if I could do this. It says that the host disabled participant screen sharing.
I'm hoping she knows what's going on, because I don't.
Is that Brian?
I'm Colin.
Colin, give us just one moment while we get our
No problem.
IT person here.
No problem.
Can you come to one? Thank you. He's on the way.
And the presentation's not in here, is it? The slides.
She's gonna go make some.
Thank you for being patient with us there, Ms. Patton. We really appreciate it.
No
She wants
problem.
to share the screen.
If we're having trouble, I can just go ahead and share, and hopefully the screen will come shortly. Do you want me to just get started or wait for the screen?
He's working on it now.
I'm gonna
Okay.
need you to request screen sharing.
Okay. Hi there.
Hi there.
Let's see here. How do I request that? I have a little button that says share screen, but when I do that, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, boy.
Do you see your share screen button?
I do, but I get the same result. Let me
Oh, so
let me-
somehow it's the host then.
Yeah. I have to go in and sign in. me resend you a new invite, this new meeting will have the ability to screen share. I just can't edit it right now. You're muted, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, so should I hop off this one now?
Yes, give me just a second and I'll
Okay.
be able to send you a new one.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone.
Quite all right. I got my laptop because I forgot to charge up my tablet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Good. I was wondering, so,
I forgot my makeup. Yes.
is this the slideshow? We've got hard copy,
Is she on?
she's off right now. But if we've got this, we don't need her to share her screen, right?
I guess.
We can get her back on the meeting. We got, she's
I
got,
think that's what, IT guys trying to do.
Yeah, you try to bring it back here, but you try to share the screen at the same time. And you have it so out, you come back there and rejoin.
Hey, I'm back now.
Awesome. You should have the share screen button. Off now.
I do, but it's still saying the same thing, unfortunately.
no, we really don't
Okay,
need.
there we go.
Aha, okay. Let me find it now. Okay, just a second here where I find it. Okay.
Yes, 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 we can.
Okay, okay, great. Okay, thanks, everybody. So, let's see here, I'm gonna show of hands. How many of y'all, have been educated a little bit about the RAD program? Okay, great. So a couple of you, but I know some haven't. So I will try to, be as quick as I can, but still provide an overview for people who may not know it. So let's see here. So RAD is one of the main ways that public housing authorities reposition their assets. That's the word that HUD uses for PHAs getting out of using public housing subsidies and instead converting to a long-term Section 8 contract. And where you take your, right now you're in the Section 9 public housing program, you have a certain number of regulations you must follow, you get your public housing subsidy through the public and Indian housing division of HUD. And so HUD recognized that over time, those have been declining resources in Congress. And as you may know, your public housing subsidies need to get reapproved every year through the annual appropriations process. What HUD was trying to do was find an alternative to that. Back when this was created in 2012, public housing subsidies were declining every year. You have two types of subsidies, operating subsidy and capital funds. And both of those were declining over time. Some years they'd be up a little bit, some years they'd be down. But overall, in a 10-year pattern, they were declining. And so what HUD was trying to do was think about ways that public housing authorities could survive and thrive, given the fact that in a study in 2010, there was a study that showed of the 2 million public housing units at the time, that there was over a backlog of capital needs that housing authorities couldn't afford to fix of over $26 billion. So Congress approved this program. It was a demonstration program at the time, and here we are in the 10th year. That is still a pilot program, and allow now up to 455,000 public housing units around the country to convert from this annual appropriation cycle to a long-term 20-year, what HUD calls Section 8 Housing Assistance Payment Contract. We call it a Section 8 contract. And what it is it provides basically your guarantee, as much as the federal government continues to fund Section 8 and is in the housing business, they fund the same amount of rents every year, plus a cost of living increase. Now, those in your staff know that we don't get public housing equivalents of cost of living increases every year. We've been really blessed the last 3 years or so with increased public housing subsidies. But most people in the industry, or I guess all people in the industry, believe that that's not going to last forever. And so what RAD is really a preventative way of trying to make sure that you don't lose subsidy in the future just depending on the whims of Congress. So RAD allows you to lock in your RAD rents, and then you get a cost of living increase every year. That's a 20-year contract, and then you're required to automatically renew every 20 years. HUD would come back and say, we want you to renew, and you must say, okay, as long as you have money, we'll continue to renew it. So over time, this really does allow you to have a steady budget. It allows you to have steady revenues plus the cost of living increase. And as you're thinking about what you might want to do in terms of redevelopment, this does allow you to better access debt and equity, because right now the land use restrictions on your property prevent you from putting any debt or equity on the project. So in addition to providing a long-term rental assistance payment contract, the RAD program also removes those restrictions that are on your property right now from getting any new debt or equity. So it's really twofold in terms of the benefits financially. Number one, you get a more stable funding platform. Number two, you get rid of the restrictions that either as part of the RAD conversion or sometimes even after the RAD conversion down the road, if you all wanted to get a mortgage or, for instance, tax credit equity, you could do that. You weren't prevented from doing so. The nice thing about RAD also is that there's less administrative burdens to your staff in terms of an annual plan and some of the other reporting that needs to happen to the local Atlanta field office. And yet this program still protects residents. There's a lot of resident notification, communication rights that residents have. So it's been a very successful program in the past 10 years. We've had 1,470 projects around the country convert to RAD. And these are housing authorities that decided we no longer want these units to be considered public housing units. We want them now to have the long-term Section 8 contract. That's been over 157,000 units. As I said, we have a 455,000 unit cap on the program right now because it's still a demonstration. We have a number of units that are in the process that haven't converted yet that are going through it. So we still have about 117,000 units that are available for housing authorities to apply. The really great statistic is that housing authorities going to RAD have been able to leverage other outside financing and other HUD financing for over $14 billion worth of construction, whether that's new construction or rehabilitation. So this is a really important slide. I didn't create it, HUD did, but I did take the numbers directly from one of your properties, your AMPs, the villa apartments. HUD keeps a large spreadsheet of every AMP around the country, and they allocate, of course, as your staff knows, a certain amount of operating subsidy per AMP. In addition, HUD gives you all, large lump sum amounts for capital funds that you all can use at your discretion for improving your properties, sort of doing the big ticket items of maintenance and modernization. In addition, of course, you all do collect 30% of residents' income towards their portion of rent. So HUD keeps these big charts, and if you trued up the 2022 cost of living numbers, right now HUD is funding, in round numbers, about $555 per unit at this AMP in operating subsidy, and that's money to keep the light bills on, to make sure the grass is cut, things like that. In addition, HUD is giving your agency a total amount of capital funds that if you did the calculations of what that is on a pro rata basis for this property, if you did it pro rata across all of your housing units and then did that on a per monthly basis, it would equal $195 per unit per month. So on the left chart here, it shows that right now you're getting $195 in capital funds per unit per month in a unit. And at this property, you're receiving about $555 per unit per month in operating subsidy. So combined, that's $750 that you're getting from HUD and HUD subsidy right now. In addition, on average, and again, these are average numbers, your tenants are paying about $83 per unit per month based on their income levels and not paying more than 30% of their income. So altogether, you as an authority for that one unit is receiving approximately $833 per unit per month for this property. So on the left side there, it shows how you're receiving subsidy right now. On the right side is showing what would happen if you went through a RAD conversion and went to a Section 8 contract. Basically what HUD does is they're not giving you new money with RAD, they're simply putting it into a new funding platform. It's the same dollars amount as what we promised Congress, but it puts it in a type of Section 8 contract that's long-lasting and takes away the restrictions of debt and equity being put on. So you can attract a lot of investors and lenders when you have these long-term, more stable funding platforms. So what you see is the tenants still pay 30% of their income post-RAD conversion. The only impact it has on residents' income is if you have any flat renters, meaning if they're paying some flat amount and it's not equal to 30% of their income. HUD has a public policy that they're really trying to get people to pay 30% of their income. So if you have any flat renters now, as part of the RAD program, you would have a 3 to 5-year window to scale in, to phase in a little bit increase in their rent, so they're ultimately in 5 years paying 30% of their income. So I feel like if you understand this chart, you can understand basically the RAD program. Again, it's not new money, it's just changing the way that HUD funds you. Because you all you're not administering vouchers, you have the choice to choose a project-based voucher contract or what's called a PBRA contract, project-based rental assistance. If you went to PBRA, you'd be like most housing authorities in Georgia who don't have voucher ability. They offer PBRA, which is managed not in the public housing division of HUD, it's actually in the multifamily division of HUD, which is where the old school Section 8 projects are, that were done, back in the 70s and 80s. So there's about 17,000 contracts like that around the country, and you get into this big tent of other projects that are, owned by nonprofit and for-profit developers. And in the course of the history of the Section 8 program, that PBRA program has never had funding cuts in the history of the program by Congress, but the voucher program has. So it's a very safe program if you're looking for the safe way to try to preserve your subsidy over time, meaning over decades. I'm going to stop talking for a minute and see if anyone has any questions, because this is an important slide to understand. Okay.
You were
Either I'm
saying,
entirely confused you,
I'm
or
sorry.
everybody understands.
I'm sorry, Ms. Patton. You were saying that can you go over that voucher? You said we don't administer our vouchers? Or,
We do.
yeah. We actually do have vouchers that we administer here at our housing.
Okay, I apologize. So you are a voucher agency?
Yes.
Okay. My sincere apologies. Then you do have the choice. I will tell you that some agencies, for instance, like Augusta, I helped them with 5 RAD conversions a couple years ago, and they manage a large voucher program. They decided to go to PBRA, in multifamily because of the reason I just said, is that there's never been funding cuts before in the program, whereas with the voucher program, there have been cuts. I have other agencies, like the city of Atlanta and I believe Columbus, but they are a voucher agency and they've gone to RAD PDB. So if you went to RAD, you would have that choice. You don't have to make it immediately, even when you apply for RAD, but that would be a decision, internally that you could weigh the pros and cons. And HUD has a nice guidance document that can help you understand the pros and cons about that.
Okay, I got another question as well. When you're in this chart here, and you're saying that the funds would come, essentially our capital, the funds we already received, it would just be put into a different pot and renamed. But would future increases to our Section 8 vouchers, would those also apply to if we were to convert to RAD?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, no. The alternative is also true, though. As long as your RAD rents are less than or equal to your reasonable rents analysis, so reasonable rents is this, analysis you do to make sure that your voucher rents aren't higher than market comps. Then you certainly can keep the RAD rents where they are. So if the market goes down, you can still keep your RAD rents even if they're higher than market, but if they're, as long as they are at reasonable rents, you can keep them. If your, if your market goes down, if you use the RAD PDD, you're going to have to adjust your RAD rents down. Whereas with PBRA, that doesn't take effect. So that is yet another reason why you might want to go to PBRA. The only changes that typically happen with RAD PDD over time is that you do get an operating cost adjustment factor, which is called OCAF for short. And that's what I was talking about, the cost of living increase. So generally in Georgia, that's been between 2 and 3% each year. So like in your regular voucher program, you don't have the same feature. It's, just based on your rent payment standard, which is based on rent, reasonable rent analysis. With RAD, regardless if the market goes up or down, as long as there is a little bit of cost of living increase, you're still going to get that OCAP every year. So HUD publishes that once a year. It's based generally on the Consumer Price Index, and it's state by state. So all of the state of Georgia is lumped together. This year it was 3.1% increase from last year. So that's another benefit of going to RAD. It doesn't matter if you're PPP or PBRA. You do get the benefit of that OCAP, that cost of living increase. But you can't just reset the RAD rents based on market. If you lock it in at closing, and it should increase over time. The OCAPs have never been cut before in Congress, and they've always gone up. And as long as you're still, right at reasonable rent or below, it just continues to increase every year.
Okay, one final question, just real quick, and I may be jumping the gun here. In converting properties to RAD, do we only have to have the amount of units we have now, or can we increase the number of units to include, say, make it some market rate units as well?
Right, great question. You're only allowed to convert the units that have public housing subsidy on them now that are in your PIC system, which is the computer system that HUD keeps track of. In addition, though, there's a policy called Fair Cloth Authority, and every housing authority has a certain limit of the amount of public housing units that they can build and own. So I'm going to ask a very technical question. Do you know if you have more Fair Cloth Authority above and beyond the existing public housing units you have right now?
No. We do not.
We do not.
No.
Okay.
So you do not know, or you know for sure you don't have any more authority?
We do not have any more authority.
Okay. So the answer would be you can only convert to RAD those units that are considered public housing units that are getting, operating subsidy right now in PIC.
Okay, okay, great. Let me clarify. If we were to take one of our properties and we convert, say, that 100 units, could we develop as well market rate units?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Okay.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, so now I understand your question. So maybe I'll go to my next, let me go to one slide here, wait.
I may have been
Okay.
jumping the gun.
So- That's okay, we'll go back to the other slides, but the answer is yes. HUD really actually encourages a mix of incomes. So what's happened, some agencies decide they're just gonna renovate their units. Others decide that they're gonna demolish and build new, and that's typically where you're gonna see more of the mixing. If you demolish, let's just say even a portion of your site, you can build back, a portion as formerly public housing units that are getting RAD, so those would be the RAD Section 8 units, and you can blend those with market rate units or other affordable units that might be able to get tax credits on it, but you wouldn't have rental subsidy. So HUD really encourages that mix of incomes from sort of a sociological perspective, a neighborhood community development perspective, but it's not required. Also, so that's what HUD allows for multi-phase awards. So let's say you had that property of 100 units. Let's say you wanted to demolish it in 3 phases and build it back at a higher density, maybe 150 units per phase, mixing up some public housing units and some market rate and some just tax credit units. HUD allows you to apply for RAD for all 100 units, and you keep your foot in the door so you have that reservation, but you can do the RAD conversions in 3 different phases if you want. So what HUD allows you to do is a thing called a portfolio award, where you do an application where you reserve all the units, your public housing units, and say, HUD, we'd like to do all RAD conversion, we just don't want to do it all at the same time. And they allow that, and then over time, until a program sunsets or becomes permanent, you can build back or redevelop at your own pace, depending on financing and all the stars aligning.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to finish this slide and then quickly go back to the other two. So in addition to that kind of fun tool you can use, HUD also allows you, I know you have, a few different amps. So HUD gives you this big chart of what your rad rents will be. And let's say one of your amps has a lot, we look at what your rents are, we look at what your expenses are, and then you have a net cash flow of basically, hopefully you have a little more at the end of the day. You can either, you can use that money and take it back into your agency, and you don't have a risk of HUD clawing back those funds. So that's something that's really different about RAD and Section 8 as well in the RAD program, is that in traditional Section 8 and in public housing, there's always the risk that HUD may come and take your operating reserves, meaning any, surplus you have at the end of each calendar year. So often that means housing authorities, and I'm not saying this is yours, but a lot of times housing authorities are really compelled to spend down all their money they get from HUD because they don't want HUD to take it back. Well, that's not really a very wise way to do it. That's not, I'm sure, how you do your own personal, accounts too, right? You bring in your salary, you have your expenses, and then hopefully you're saving up a little money over time for a new roof or for a nice vacation with your kids or whatnot. HUD with the RAD program allows you to do that. So the net cash flow each year, meaning any surplus from your rents versus minus your expenses, you can use that for your own purposes. So that could be to develop new housing in the future, it could be to fund your staff, it could be to fund support services, it could be to save up for a rainy day fund, but that is not federal money, that is your money to spend, within the guidelines of your, agency's missions over time. So that's a really neat feature. And if you have one property that's cash flowing really well, and you have another property with, you look at the RAD rents and expenses that is not cash flowing well, you can actually, as we call, rob Peter to pay Paul. You can actually permanently, before you close on RAD, move some of the RAD rents over to another property so that they both can cash flow decently. And that's called rent bundling. So that's a neat feature. And then just a couple others is HUD actually allows you to move the Section 8 contract. So let's say you found a piece of property that the city's going to give you, or that you want to purchase and it's in a better neighborhood, or you have some reasons to move and de-densify all your public housing. You can actually do that through a transfer of assistance where you literally move the HAP contract that would normally be going back on the public housing site. You can move that to another site with all sorts of approvals, of course, through HUD. But it allows some income mixing and reducing, the concentration of poverty and some other really good public policy reasons that you all might be interested in. Lastly, if you were to use certain types of financing, meaning the bond, Texas bond 4% tax credits, HUD does allow you to blend with RAD and a Section 18 disposition process. And Section 18 is more like your voucher program now, where you would get tenant protection vouchers for a portion of your units, and those vouchers aren't based on your public housing rent. They're actually based on 110% of fair market rents. So those oftentimes are higher rents. So I know this is really big picture, but you can actually have some interesting tools in the toolbox to redevelop your property besides just RAD. Today I'm not going to go into more detail on that, but just to tell you that HUD has a lot of different ways to look at trying to use RAD to help make a redevelopment happen. So I'm going to go back to this slide, and this will be the last slide that I actually spend a bit of detail on. The other ones I'm going to leave for you just to read for later. I emailed this to Angela, and we'll just have that available if you need it. So I've already talked about why PHAs might want to convert to RAD. Number one bullet point is that long-term stability. I also told you, number two, that it removes those restrictions about putting new money into your project. Like I said, for number three bullet is that you are able to attract lenders and investors who like the long-term stability of the Section 8 program. And like I said, you do qualify for OPAP, that cost of living increase, which is something really new for housing authorities that you're not used to getting.
Thank you.
Did someone ask a question?
No
Okay.
questions at this point.
Okay, like I said, you really get to act more like a mission-minded nonprofit owner of affordable housing, which is you get your rents, you get to choose how you create your operating budget. HUD does not approve your operating budgets like they do with public housing now. So you have more control of how you spend your money, which also means that there's more responsibility. So you've got a certain amount in your Section 8 contract, so that means you're gonna have to manage your property, just like your own personal finances. You know, you have to stay within your own means. You have to do that as well when you go to RAD. But if you can find some cost savings or manage your money wisely, like a typical multifamily owner, you have that net cash flow every year that you can take. HUD allows you to take that once a year as an owner distribution back into your agency to use for your own mission purposes. So if you can properly structure your project right, and let's say you are going to do a big redevelopment, either major rehabilitation or demolition new construction, and you partner with a developer to help you do that, you can, like I said, generate a lot of cash flow. You could generate developer fees from the redevelopment, you know, as part of, like, you pay your contractor, you pay your architect, you actually earn a developer fee with your development partner for doing all the hard work through redevelopment. And also, if you have excess operating reserves or capital funds, you actually can make that as a low-cost loan to your redevelopment. So you contribute that money, which you know is a grant from HUD, and over time, with the net cash flow of the property, you might be able to, if you're in partnership with a developer and investor, you might be able to structure it as a loan and then get loan payments with interest back to you for the HUD capital grants, capital funds and operating subsidies you put in. So there's a few different ways that you all could, generate some additional income through redevelopment. Like I said, RAD has less requirements. If you do the PDDs through RAD, it basically just expands your voucher pot. So you use your existing voucher administrative system right now and your staff and your IT systems. The pot just gets bigger and you would allocate, those project-based vouchers to your public housing units. If you go PDRA, again, you're working with HUD multifamily, and like I said, there's less reporting requirements, so that means less cost to your agency. My experience over the years is that the HUD multifamily staff and the Office of Recapitalization in Washington, D.C., which is where the RAD program is housed, they're very responsive staff. They're generally easy to work with, not always, but most of the time. And most people I know much prefer to work with the RAD office than the public housing field office here in Atlanta. We've got some good folks, but it's very cumbersome. So I'll just highlight that RAD can be flexible with all types of conversions. I've already talked about you can bring in tax credits. You can use a debt-only approach. I have some agencies like Macon that I helped get a new loan through FHA. They didn't bring any tax credits in, but we did about $16,000 or $17,000 per unit in rehabilitation. And they brought in some of their own capital funds. We leveraged it with very affordable debt. And the interest rates right now are about hovering around the low 3%, 3.5%. And that's a 40-year mortgage. So it's really great financing. You also might just use your own financing, your own capital funds, and your own operating reserves if you don't have a significant level of repairs that you need to do. Now, I know a lot of agencies have a backlog of capital needs, so you may need more money than what you've got in your receipt cushions. But there's some agencies that convert to RAD based on a capital needs assessment that would need to be done that show, hey, we're not going to win any beauty contests, but we're safe, stable housing, and we can convert to RAD and not do the major redevelopment. And there's about 45% of all the RAD conversions nationally do that, actually. So you don't have to do a redevelopment with RAD, but quite a few, agencies do use RAD for redevelopment. So there was a nice study that was shown that for every $1 of HUD funding rights return. So let's say you're doing a renovation and you need to temporarily relocate residents off their unit, maybe to another unit on site or off site for a little while and then back on site. You have a responsibility and a requirement to offer them a Section 8 unit through RAD once the renovations are done. It's not promising that they go back to the same unit, but that they go back to the same property or another Section 8 funded unit. So we call that a one-for-one replacement, basically. It's something that's really important in the RAD program to make sure that residents are protected and that they will continue to live in affordable housing once any type of redevelopment is done. I've already shared that RAD rents are typically only based on your PHA funding. You remember that chart I showed you earlier? So just remember that typically it's not going to be based on market. So if market increases, typically you're not going to mark it up to market over time. You're continuing to grow a little bit over time with your cost of living increase, but original contract is based on your PHA funding. So if you decide to relocate residents or anything involved, with impacting residents' lives, the RAD program, there's lots of notifications, relocation requirements, etc. So just keep that in mind, your residents are protected. You will need to do a capital needs assessment, like I said, and be able to show that you're going to reserve, money to repair the project as needed. And a couple other features I really want to make sure you know is that RAD requires that a public housing authority or a nonprofit continues to own the project long term. So you might go into a tax credit private partnership together, but you as the PHA or another nonprofit needs to be part of that partnership. So it's a great way for people to understand that this will continue to have a nice, mission component to these projects over time. And when you get these 20-year HAP contracts, you remove the public housing restrictions on income, but you put a new RAD use agreement so that residents have to earn 80% or less of the area median income, just as they do now. So, and that continues to renew as long as your HAP contract keeps renewing every 20 years. So this really is a way to preserve long-term affordable housing in your community, most likely with you all owning either in partnership or outright altogether the housing units over time. Even if you go to public housing, you are still an agency that is owning affordable housing through Section 8. So one of the things that I always ask people to think about is if you think about, getting out of public housing, is you're still a public housing authority, and that's in your name. Some people decide to change their names, but you still have a lot of rights statutorily. When the housing authority statute was created here in Georgia, you still have a lot of responsibilities about, housing and taking care of low-income people. So even though you might be owning all Section 8 at the end of the day and be a voucher agency, and not own public housing units anymore, you still have a strong mission and role in your community. You still would have a board. You just no longer are owning Section 9 public housing units. So one of the questions to ask is, what do we want for our agency? What do we want for our properties? Do we want to get into development or redevelopment? Do we want to partner with another developer? Do we want to continue to own these projects long term? Or do we want a developer to come in and rehabilitate them and own them where we take a small role, and they take a larger role? Or do we want to own them outright over time? So those are some big picture decision-making points that your agency will need to do. As a reminder, when you go through RAD, those capital funds and operating reserves are now going to be tied specifically to the units, to the properties they are located on. So you do need to think about how your central office is going to be funded. Most agencies do that by making sure your operating budgets have your staff listed in them. You pay your RAD rent, you have an operating budget, and then you have any leftover net cash flow. Some of the staff can be part of that property budget, and some of them that are like your central office staff can be paid for through the net cash flow or developer fees or other ways you're earning income, like your admin fees from your voucher program over time. So you're going to need to think about staffing and the positions Like I said, it's this big change because you're no longer compelled to like spend down all the money that HUD gives you every year. You're really thinking through like, wow, like we get to keep the money if we spend it wisely at the end of each year. So it really makes you think about, sticking to your budgets, thinking about net operating income, making sure you keep your properties occupied and full because that's how you're generating rents to pay your expenses. And HUD's going to require you every month to put into a small amount of replacement reserves. That's sort of like if you were part of a condo or a homeowners association and you pay a homeowners association fee every month for like new driveways or new common expenses. HUD's going to make you do that as well because you're no longer going to have the capital fund separately to do the big ticket items. So as part of your operating budget, you'll be reserving some money out for the big ticket items like replacing HVAC in year 10 or replacing your roofs, 12 years from now. You start saving up for those big picture items. And like I said, there's a lot of communication and transparency that's needed to make sure your stakeholders, including your larger community, your city government, your residents are all understanding that even though you might convert to RAD, you're still in the business of providing affordable housing and the residents will still be protected with, safe, quality housing with rental assistance even when they, convert to RAD. I'm not going to go through this slide, but there is a sort of a measured process. You apply for it, which is a very easy application process. There's due diligence you do. You go through a closing process. If you have to do rehab or new construction, you do that. So most times I tell people, if you're thinking about the RAD process from the time you apply, give yourself about a year to get through each RAD conversion. It really helps sometimes to have a consultant to walk you through or a development partner that understands the process. It's not rocket science. It's just like any other HUD thing. There's a process, there's a protocol, and it's nice to work with someone that can help walk you through it. I know some agencies have done it on their own, and so it is possible. It just takes staff hours. And a lot of times, obviously, your staff are already got their day jobs of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it can be nice to work with outsiders, whether it's a consultant or developer, to help you through the process. Here's some websites I'm going to leave with you on these slides, and then my contact information. So happy to answer questions now or in the future. Happy to come back, or you can drop me an email, or you can set up a conference call or another Zoom meeting at people's
I have one additional question.
Sure.
And this is going back to we did our one-to-one public housing to RAD conversion, and then we've added in those market rate units as well. Can our current HCV recipients that are currently renting other places, can they occupy our new market rate units?
Great question. Absolutely. So the sort of best practice nationally is that you have this mix of income. This is, again, an ideal project we're talking about, right? Where all the stars align for all the financing and everything. An ideal scenario would be that you have a proportion, maybe 30, 40% of your units are the RAD, PDRA or PDD Section 8 units. You have another proportion of market rate, meaning like that have no restrictions. It's just whoever can afford the rent qualify for the rent. So, those might be 10, 20% of your units. And then you have that balance of units. And you could, if you chose to take your folks who have HCVs, portable vouchers, you could accept them and they continue to keep their portability. And you're just, just like your other Section 8 landlords, that accept these payments, you are that type of a landlord. Or you actually can choose to project-base some of those vouchers that aren't RAD vouchers, but are part of your own voucher program. And you could project-base some of those vouchers on that site as well for that balance. So let's just make this easy, like to keep things simple. So let's say of your 100 units, you have 40 units that you're going to go through and have RAD households. 10 units that you're going to have is market rate, no income restrictions. So 60% in total. So then you have another 50% of units that you could target for folks who are holding a voucher, and are keeping it portable. So let's say you want to keep 25% of your units as no project-based assistance, but are open to, if portable voucher folks want to live there, you would accept them. And let's say the other 25%, you want to purposely choose that you want to project-base some of your voucher authority there. So you've got this really interesting mix of people living on that one property. That's a best practice. Clearly not a requirement in any of the RAD program or tax credit programs that you might use, but that's a way to think about really doing something catalytic in your community. Does
Okay.
anyone have any more questions?
When do we get started?
This is just education at this point. Yes. This is,
That's still a question.
yeah, it's a great question. How do we, within this RAD process, how do we account for, say, elderly and disabled in this process of what how we're currently already housing them, but how would they be taken care of during this conversion process and then thereafter?
Sure. So one of the questions is to go back to this, very wonky IT program called PIC. And the question is, in your PIC system, that's your public housing computer system that HUD works with you on, are those actually designated as elderly and disabled, or have you just, over time made that a preference on your property?
No, we have no designated elderly.
We don't have any designated elderly.
Okay, great. So in the RAD program, you can't designate and require elderly and disabled, but you can create preferences. And some of those preferences you can create. Actually, one of the preferences might be any existing resident, that's the age of 55 and above, has a preference to live in certain units in a property. So you can create preferences as part of your Section 8 contract and house rules, and HUD would review those and approve those as part of your RAD closing process. So it'd basically be doing what you do now, which is you don't have a requirement, but the way that you've operated it and maybe make some preferences could continue with HUD approval. Now, of course, if you are thinking about relocating them because you're doing some renovations and then want to move them back or move them to a different property, there's all sorts of considerations and, like I said, requirements related to relocation of residents. You have to pay their moving costs, you have to do a lot of notifications, you help them pack. So we find that particularly with elderly folks, you need a lot of planning and communication if there's any type of moving involved. But some of my most favorite experiences of these types of RAD projects when you are doing development is when you move an elderly resident who's lived in a public housing unit that might be safe, but is certainly not, modern or having conveniences like central air conditioning and things like that. It's so heartwarming when you move them into a rehabilitated unit or a new unit. And I've had, elderly residents say they never thought that they could afford to live in such a beautiful apartment before. It's really heartwarming when you get those kind of comments and really makes it all worthwhile at the end of the day.
Okay, great.
All right.
Any additional questions from commissioners?
I have a question. How would veterans fit into this program and they have a housing certificate and they wanted to be a home ownership underneath RAD?
Oh, so RAD is not a home ownership program.
Okay, it's just a rental.
Yes.
It is,
Okay.
right. And it's only for your residents that are receiving public housing subsidy right now. So
Okay.
RAD is not for your existing voucher program. HUD does have a Section 32 homeownership program with people with vouchers. So that is something that you could work with HUD, again, probably getting a consultant to help you through that process. It's not the same as Section 18 disposition, but it's got some similar features. And you would work with the same division in HUD, which is called the Special Application Center, staff. And, you know, I have good relationships. I know the director and the deputy directors. And in recent years, it's a great question you're asking, ma'am, because many authorities are thinking through homeownership, particularly if you have some units that are single family or duplex units, and you want to think about trying to encourage, you know, some of your voucher holders into homeownership over time.
Any additional questions? Ms. Patton, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation.
You're wonderful. You're wonderful. It's a wonderful group. You've asked a lot of questions. Thank you for your time. I know a lot of it's probably gone over your head. That's how these things go. I've been doing this now for 10 years, and I feel like I learn something new about RAD every day just because the rules keep changing. It's a demonstration program. So it's wonderful because this side of HUD is actually being very responsive to stakeholders. So like we keep saying things like, this doesn't work, or this could really help if you did this. And many times they're listening to us, but what that means is the rules are changing. So if you did a RAD conversion 5 years ago, it's going to be different than now, and it's going to be different probably to 2 years from now because they're still trying to evolve it to be as, you know, as user-friendly as possible. So, you know, if I could be of help in the future, feel free to reach out, whether that's in an engagement perspective or just some free advice. As some of you may know, I'm very active in GARA, and, you know, I'm the head of the chair of the RAD committee. We'll be putting on a couple sessions at the spring conference. We usually put sessions on at every conference about repositioning and RAD, and we try to have PHAs there that have gone through RAD to explain the, you know, the ups and the downs, but almost, I think, now that I think about it, even the most challenging RAD projects, every PHA that I know said, yeah, it was difficult to get through the change, but once you get through that first year and are really settled into it, every agency I know is very happy that they've made it through the RAD program. So I leave you with that, and really nice to talk to y'all today.
Thank you so much. Again, you've given us a lot to discuss as a board. And as we begin to take these initial steps, the information you've provided is going to, in my opinion, is already invaluable. So thank you so much.
Great. You're welcome. And the one last thing I'll say is, whether it's me or someone else, I highly recommend that you do get someone to help you think through your whole portfolio, not just one of your 3 amps. It's kind of like just looking, you know, down in a funnel without realizing and going through all 3 and trying to map out what makes sense for each one, and then also mapping out sort of a timeline and how we might try to fund each one of those. So that's my last piece of advice, is that you think about it holistically with your whole portfolio and not just one of your amps. So
I've got my notes right here. Got my notes right here for that exact example. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Patton. Really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you at the conference in May.
very good. Great. Well, y'all have a blessed day. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Excellent information. Just quickly, Ms. Strickland, there's just based upon that presentation. You know how much our funding has declined over the last 10, 15 years roughly?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Ballpark, something like that, how much? I mean, I know she said that of course it has declined nationwide. I'm just wondering approximately how much money have we declined?
Our operating subsidy has not declined significantly. It just recently changed this year because of paying off a loan related to the EPC, and we were getting funds to pay that, and almost the entire time here, we've been getting that funding. So I would have to compare what we're getting now to a time before I started working here, and I don't know what that was at the time. But our capital funds have gone up considerably.
Capital funds have gone up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And of course, you mentioned about the flat rates and such and so forth. We got a ballpark idea of how many of our units are flat rate?
Do you, I don't,
Off
it's,
the top of my head.
yeah, it's not a
We
lot.
don't have a lot.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Okay. It was just a couple of questions I was, wrote down as she was going through her presentation there. And, so we don't actually have elderly, or as you said, we don't have that designation for any of the disabled or elderly or anything like that.
We have units that are handicap accessible,
Right.
but they're not designated.
Right, it's not, right.
Yeah.
Do we know how many of the vouchers that we have that are, and again, this, I understand, it's just off the top of your heads, how many vouchers that we have that are currently being used by elderly or disabled persons currently?
It's not a sorting parameter in the vouchers.
It's not a sorting parameter. That's all I got for now. I'll write all this stuff up once I can figure it out. Might need some action. Any further discussion on the presentation? Okay, we'll move on to, I'm sorry, can we turn that mic back on so I can actually be able to read? Thank you so much. Next up, we have another delegation, which is Mr. Zach Lott. Good morning, Mr. Lott. Pastor Reverend Dr. Lott.
I don't know why I'm here.
The question on the table is, how are we moving forward with the project or proposed monument in McIntyre? Who's gonna do what? Where's the funding gonna come from? We have people calling, asking if they should contribute. We as staff don't know who's doing what. And we need direction from the board on where the board wants to proceed. So I was asked last month to have Mr. Black attend.
With respect, all we did was provide funding. It's Reverend Lyde's project, and so I think he needs to tell us what his plans are, and where we fit in that, and where everybody else fits in that, and how it's not our project. And unless you want it to be our project, in which case then we have to take that into consideration. But you got to tell us where
I
you're
sure
headed.
don't want it to be your project.
Well, I kind of predicted that.
What I would like to say to you is that the project itself was presented to you wholeheartedly as we defined it in your bulletin, in your paperwork that you got from a young lady by the name of, her name escapes me.
Charlene Thomas? Charlene?
No, no.
No? Okay.
It came from the lady who was over Brunswick Clean and Beautiful.
Oh, Leah, Miss Leah.
Right, Miss Leah, thank you. And the reason it came from her is because, as I stated the last time I was here, we didn't ask y'all for any more money, because y'all told me not to. That's what I said. So I didn't come back and say, please y'all, give us more money. We sent the project to you based on what we thought would be representative of a project that would demonstrate that veterans have a place in your particular properties to demonstrate that they served this country, that they served it overseas, that what they did was a lot of them returned and got the same kind of treatment that I got when I returned, including lynchings. And so what we did was we put this project together because we wanted to honor veterans who have been dishonored. That was number one. Number two, we wanted to make sure that that what we did was not only respectful of what happened with the housing authority, but it was absolutely something that would inspire your tenants to see beauty in their lives. Third, we wanted to make sure that we demonstrated that African soldiers served overseas. That is why we went to the Japanese cherry blossom trees. We have no problem with the notion of struggling by our lonely self to get the money, because we know from the standpoint of anybody like me coming before a body like this, we are usually rejected. Now, I'm not trying to be hostile, I'm just trying to be factual. There is a park in Hanover Square that represents the Confederate soldiers that fought in the Civil War. We never, ever tried to stand in the way of that particular monument because we never cared what happened to that monument. What we cared about is that there was a park that was put up on Newcastle Street that cost we, the taxpayers, $2,013,146, excuse me, I'm just about to cuss, dollars. And what happened is the people who like me, who fought in this war here, who came back to this country and was arrested the night I got back, we
Reverend Lyon.
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question? Many of the people, and Ms. Strickland would have a list, I don't know who said what, but it's my understanding that the people that you have talked to about funding have come to us and asked the Housing Authority what our role is. And so staff's not been able to respond to that because we don't have a role. And the question is, do you want us to have a role? And when the people ask us, to the extent that we're going to be partnering or participating or responsible, we have to have a response to give to those potential donors to your program. And so that's what I think we're trying to resolve, and you correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, and also those donors are saying they have to give the money to the housing authority.
To make it tax deductible.
Yes, and the county also said if they participate in giving any money, that we have to have a minimum memorandum of understanding between us and the county.
Right.
So that's why I'm not sure of our.
Well, I don't know that that's been explained to Reverend Lyon, and that's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say.
we had a
is
conversation a
with-
month or so ago.
You're not hostile, we're not hostile.
Yeah.
All we're saying is people are trying to put us in a position of some responsibility. We need definition, it's your project. We can't take over your project unless you want us to. We can't, we don't know what level of participation we have until you tell us. And so that's what you're here for, is to, you want to go forward with the project. We want you to go forward with the project. We want to help to the extent we can. We just got to have our role defined.
Okay. The simple issue came down to one. It came down to one. We were told for the project to be what it is and what was presented to you, that there was a mere need for a memorandum of understanding for the money to come through you, because I don't, excuse me, one of the things that bother me about coming here is that black folk have to crawl on their knees for change. That's one of the things. Let's get to the real deal. So what happens is I wanted to make sure, personally, that I did not touch no money, okay? And so not touching the money meant just simply that, for an example, Leah, who was the one that brought the issue up, she was the one that brought the issue up. The reason she brought and I think that Alan Booker, the commissioner, through his lawyer, brought the issue up. And they brought the issue up because what happened is they wanted to make sure that the project was not going to be stopped by you. Not put in a position to be improved on, but stopped by you. Now, the whole idea is that the money just flows to you for the project to be done. What we have on our project, you may see in your work, is a thing that dealt with a pedestal in the center of that particular concrete pad that we already put there, with busts of black soldiers that served from the Civil War all the way to the Vietnam conflict. And what we did was we went to a Mr. Kevin Pullen to have Mr. Pullen do those busts for us and the pedestal. And because of that, him and I agreed, because of the fact that we knew we weren't supposed to come back here and ask for any more money. We agreed that him and I would work to find the money for the bus and the pedestal. And that's what we did. So what happened is, he knew that Mr. Booker had a chance to be able to fund that project. So he then went to Mr. Booker. Mr. Booker was so delighted that what he did was decide that he would fund it based on the fact that Mr. Kevin Pullen would get, because of the bus that he was going to put there, the money from the county, which we pay taxes on, by the way, which we need to be consultants to the housing authority, by the way, like Michelle is. Because I heard her statement when at the end of all of that presentation, she said, please y'all, take me as your consultant. One of the things that you will find when a Negro has gone through combat, we understand a lot of crap. And especially as it relates to the federal government and the rejection by certain people in this system. I don't want to bring all of that up. I just want to make sure that what happened is, if you want to, give a memorandum of understanding so the money can flow through you and the project can be done. Because that's where the project is being held up. Not by me, because I'm hustling like a dog to go to every person I can. Please, would y'all give me $30 to get the money to do the project? And we gonna get the money. We just don't want to handle the money. The reason we don't want to handle the money is because we don't want the same mess that has happened forever with African people in this country.
Do I understand then, or do we understand, that it's your desire that we do have a memorandum of understanding and Brunswick Housing Authority assume control of the project?
No. Assume control of the money.
Not the project, just the money. Mm-mm.
Well, I don't know how that would work.
I do.
But
Give a memorandum of understanding, the money comes to the housing authority, you see the project up, then all of us go out there and clap like little, we'll make a decision that what happens is the Japanese cherry blossom trees. One of the things that happened with us, and I'm gonna be honest with you, you've got to be careful with the notion of the history that I could bring up in terms of how this housing authority has operated with poor people. I know how they have operated with poor people. I don't want to bring that into this discussion, but I can definitely let you know that the way that poor people have been treated by this housing authority, beginning with my knowledge of this housing authority, from the time that what happened is there was a separation of the two particular first housing authorities put up. Glenvilla being white, McIntyre Court being black. If you want all of that history to come back through here, I don't mind doing that. Because it's time for us to quit playing here and get that project done and put us in a position to where what we can do is be citizens working with each other.
Mr. Lau,
Yes, ma'am.
listen. We have to move along, but listen. You know many people that do grant writings and things like that. You got Alan Booker in this, got the county in this. Why can't you get your grant writers or your organizations and petition to raise the money for what you need to do?
Then the issue would still be the same.
I think that at this point, what Mr. Lyde is saying is that it's the distribution of the funds
That's right.
that we have here at this point. And so my question, and I'm gonna rely on Ms. Strickland, of course, and Commissioner Kilgore, because you guys have been here just a little bit longer, since we don't have counsel. In this process of distribution of funds, how would the housing authority be accountable in that scenario?
If we receive the funds, Sharon's gone.
we'd be fully accountable.
Yes,
For
and
dispersing it to
they
them.
would have to go through the audit process and everything. We would be 100% responsible.
To disperse the money to them.
Yeah.
But where are the funds coming from?
It's,
Well, that's yet to be determined.
yeah, it's just different groups that have been approached, have called and said, okay, we don't mind doing this, but we want, the money has to go to the housing authority. Are you guys accepting this money? Are you in support of this project?
But it,
Well, let me ask this question.
It's-
Hang on, let me ask this question. Is it only because we are a nonprofit that it needs to flow through the housing authority?
Well, because it's on our property.
It's because it's on our property.
And because the organizations that are developed are nonprofits, and they're not gonna give money to an individual, so to speak.
So we back to discussion.
So what we're trying to figure out is how we can push along the project, accept funds, without any accountability to the housing authority.
Well, we accept funds, we have accountability.
We cannot avoid that.
To disperse it.
Yeah.
You have accountability for the funds.
And in this situation, how would the housing authority not have any accountability in this situation? I need ideas.
We won't have it.
We can't not
We
avoid
can't.
responsibility.
Because we gotta disperse the
If
money.
if we're not dispersing the money, other than it's our property that is being on,
We would be dispersing.
if we weren't, how would we still have accountability?
We wouldn't. We
But
wouldn't have
it's-
any involvement at all.
So
Well, except for, from the county, they said because the money spent on our property, that they would require a memorandum of understanding. And that's from what I understand, talking to their lawyer.
So, and let me, I'm just trying to get clarity here. The county, because it's on our land, we need to have memorandum of understanding for the county to give money to the project.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I don't know if they would give it to the I mean, I can't speak for them. I don't know if they would give it to the project or if they would require that it come to us. I don't know. I mean, that would be
If
something
there
we'd have
was
to find.
another nonprofit in this arena of nonprofits, because apparently we're speaking about more than one, if they were to step up for the accountability of disbursement of the funds, would we still need to have this conversation with Mr. Lyde and his project?
My belief and understanding would be only tangentially from the standpoint of it's the housing authority property. And we would have to have some knowledge and understanding of what's going to be done. Presumably, we wouldn't have any objection at all, but just from an informational standpoint, this is what's going to happen, and unless there was a really strong objection, which I can't imagine what it'd be, the project go forward just as it would be presented to us.
Okay, Commissioner Bailey, I believe you had your hand up next, and then we'll go to Commissioner Nickerson.
So-
You had your hand up?
So the property is on our land, on housing authority.
Correct.
So wouldn't we have some responsibility to the development since it really is on our property? Even though he wants to take on that project?
I would think so, because we're gonna have to maintain it.
Yes.
And we're gonna have to, we get REAC inspections, there's
Depends
rules.
on what the memorandum of understanding says.
But no, there's no, we would still have to maintain it.
But under the memorandum of understanding, the responsibility would go to the developer, and some kind of agreement on the schedule of how the maintenance is gonna be handled. It
So-
doesn't necessarily have to,
HUD would hold us responsible.
right,
Okay.
and as long as we've got a contract with whoever the entity is that would be responsible for maintaining it, that would satisfy our responsibility, and so it wouldn't necessarily involve our staff. If it could be settled contractually.
Yeah.
And so
It
there's a myriad number of issues that would have to be resolved through the memorandum of understanding
Right.
and documented
Right,
before we can go forward.
right.
All of which is also subject to approval by the developer, which would be Reverend Lyde.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's where we are.
I mean, it's like we can't go on county property and build something on county
Right.
property and just say, we'll take care of it. I mean, because if something happens, whoever it happens to is gonna sue the county, they're not gonna sue us.
So if it's on our property, we should be at least somewhat be part of the development of where it's going to be. And especially if we're looking at the future of redeveloping. Because if you put something there now, that does not mean it's gonna be there when we decide to go RAD or whatever, however we're gonna redevelop.
I
It might
agree.
be restructured somewhere else.
I agree.
So if we're gonna be responsible for distributing the money, we should have some say-so of how the development will come about. Cause that's like saying, this is our property, but we're gonna tell you how to, what size you're gonna do and how you're gonna live there, this, that, and the other thing. So we should, if we decide to take this part on, we should have some say-so of where it's gonna be and what's gonna be on that property.
Let's have a comment from Mr. Lyde, please.
It sounds real good about the notion of your responsibility. It sounds real good about the notion of the fact that what you should do is have the say-so because it's your property. Don't ever forget this, ma'am. This is the citizen's property. It does not belong to, excuse me, ma'am.
But the
It's the
citizens have to do
citizen,
with that
it
temporary.
is the citizen's property. The property that Negroes went and fought for you to have this particular property. In our particular need is to demonstrate that there have been people who have been misused by the system. Now, wait a minute, ma'am. When the people came to you about this memorandum of understanding, it was the attorney that came. They didn't come to Mrs. Strickland. They came to the lame attorney that y'all paying every day that broke his leg or broke his brain or whatever he did and has not been here. And the lawyer was supposed to speak to the lawyer, not Miss Strickland. Miss Strickland does not have the final say-so in nothing. What has the final say-so is the memorandum of understanding that you put together. I'm sorry, he's a tax commission. Kilgore is right.
Either Chapman or I should be insulted, I'm not sure which,
Well,
because
you ain't insulted. The minimum, taking up your time, you invited me here. I didn't ask you to come here, okay?
Hang on, listen.
If you irritated with me, I'll leave.
You're going off
Madam
the
Vice Chair
court.
Bailey,
You're going, yeah,
give
you're
me
going off
just a
the
second.
court.
Mr. Lye, now, I know that we've had some discussion, well, at least I've discussed individually with my board members about us repositioning our properties anyway, okay? I am uncertain at this point, other than herding all the cats that's involved in this, sitting them in a room and coming up with a solution, okay? And that's the nonprofits, the various attorneys, and Ms. Strickland, and maybe myself and another board member. Because at this point, it's just far too confusing on what are our options and how to do this. However, as an additional part in there, again, if we are talking about repositioning our properties, and the board has not voted on this, we are just literally educating ourselves on it. There's an option there as well in the future. So I would say at this point, let's get the parties together, the nonprofits, the two attorneys, Ms. Strickland, and we get out in a room, yourself included, of course. We sit down in a room and we figure out what can be done. It's one thing for us to quote legal, but I believe no one here is an attorney.
I is.
So, is that okay with you?
Yes, sir.
And again, that way, and when we figure out an actual solution, we can then bring it back to the board, if it needs to even come back to the board at that point. Is that okay with you?
It absolutely is.
Great, thank you
We
so
just
much.
want the project to go ahead.
I want the project to move forward. We
Thank
have
you.
a couple different ways to make it happen, so let's see about making that happen, and then we can move forward.
Thank you,
from there.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Lye. So, will you contact Ms. Strickland? Strickland, let me know, and who all's involved, and then we can have an opportunity to sit down and,
At
With the attorneys and
this
agents.
point, there were two other entities involved other than the Housing Authority and myself and the organization I represent, which is the Marshals of Glen GI Club. There are a lot of folk that we have gone to because what we wanted to do was have this project up so that we could celebrate the lives of people who've been left out. The people that's in it right now that has asked the question for the memorandum of understanding, one, is the county. Two, Miss Leah, because she is talking about the trees and the vegetation.
okay, great. So, again, we can just herd all the cats, that'd be great. Any other questions for Mr. Lye?
I think that when we bring everything together, this can be reasoned out. That was a good presentation that you gave
Thank you,
to
sir.
everybody that's concerned. I felt that.
Thank you.
And I think that we can all reason together at some point. But the main thing, we got our reasons out. We gotta start from somewhere. So this will be up for discussion.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Y'all have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Lodge, we really appreciate it. Moving on to old business, we have approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on February 9, 2022. Has everyone had an opportunity to review and or read those minutes?
Move the minutes be approved as drafted and presented by staff.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Let's
move forward.
Let's pick a name, let's pick a name.
I think it was Mrs. Move forward, Commissioner Dickerson. So I have a motion by Commissioner Kilgore, seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. Is there any further discussion on the regular minutes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, have the same. That one passes unanimously. Old business, we have approval of the minutes of the annual meeting held on February 9, 2022. Has everyone had an opportunity to read and review those?
Yes.
I will entertain a motion.
I motion that we approve the minutes of the annual meeting held on February 9th, 2022.
Do we have
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey. Seconded by Commissioner Kilgore. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same. That one passes unanimously. Approval of the February 2022 financial reports. Has everyone had an opportunity
Yes.
to review those?
Yes.
Yes.
I had a request to go over one particular part,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll try to make it as quick as I can and not confusing. It's the housing choice voucher page, and I just wanted to point out a couple things. Number one, this page is a combination of the admin side of Section 8 and the HAP side, the landlord side. So when you see that it appears that we're losing money, if you break those pieces out, I'll explain it. For Section 8, up at the top where it says HAP funding, that is what HUD has actually deposited in our account so far for this fiscal year. HUD gives us an amount every year we're eligible for. They do a calculation based on information that is a few months old based on what our leasing was at that time. They fund us that money each month. The HAP expense, which is farther down on the page, is what we actually, it's the accumulation of what we have paid out this year. It doesn't mean that, let's just say we didn't have any extra money, any reserves, anything. If HUD sent us $300,000 and we needed to pay out $350 and we had no reserves, we could go to HUD because we have reserves with HUD. We have over $500,000 of reserves with HUD of money that we have not spent that we were eligible for. We could go to them and say, send us some of our reserves to make up this. We don't have that problem because we have enough reserves that you don't see in this statement in-house currently to make up the difference. So there's always a lag time with your HAP funding from HUD because they're using older information to fund you.
Is our reserve allowed to be on our financial report?
What we have, HUD comes in only periodically, like maybe once a year, and looks at your numbers and said, okay, geez, you were given $5 million this year and you only spent $4,900,000. They're not going to come in every single month and take out what the difference between what they funded you and what you spent. But they will come in once a year or so and take what they call it excess reserves. They'll take what you have that you did not spend, and they don't take it away from you. They just put it back in they call them HUD held funds.
Right.
So at the end of the year on our balance sheet, we do have funds in reserve for HUD that is reserved for HAP. But those will be taken back by HUD, and then they will be put back in HUD's bank account, and they will not be on our financials at all.
Okay,
But we still have access to it.
right.
On the admin side, it's the same thing. We have our expenses, and that's what every other expense on this page is, besides HAP, is an admin expense. We have those expenses which are real, but we are funded by HUD on a monthly basis based on the number of units we have leased up, and there's a lag time. So it might appear, well, actually on the admin side, we're doing very well. But everything that's on this statement that is not HAP is an admin expense. And those are accounted for completely separately, and that is also based on the number of vouchers currently being held. I just wanted to point out that what you don't see on there, because it's on the balance sheet aside the reserves, what we have in place right now is for HAP, we have about $90,000 excess that we have in our account, bank account, that HUD has not taken back yet to add to our HUD held reserves, okay? And on the admin side, we have a little over $500,000 of admin fee reserves. And a lot of that is the money that we got for CARES funding, for Section 8. That is included in that. But those reserves are also available to us to use for administrative purposes under Section 8 program.
Thank you.
If that was tried to keep that simple.
Okay.
I asked Sharon to go through this so that, they're financial statements that we all see every month. And I just didn't want it to be wrote that every month we approve something, and want to make sure everybody had better than a passing understanding of what's reflected in the statements, so that our vote is an informed vote, and I asked her to make that.
Well, we thank you for that, Commissioner Cody.
Also, I gave everybody a hard copy of the audit report, the finalized. If you want it electronically, let me know and I'll email it.
Yeah, the balance sheet information.
Okay.
Is
Okay, everybody.
there.
Everybody except Mr. Bailey.
Appreciate the hard copy. It's gonna get lost somewhere.
Okay.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation about the February 2022 financial report.
I move that we approve the financial report as submitted by staff.
Do we have a
Second.
Kilgore and Bailey? Do we have any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same. Motion passes unanimously. Executive Director's items, new business.
The first item is approve the long maintenance contract extension. We sent out a copy of the current contract and the proposed extension, which is allowed under that contract.
Is this the first or second?
Last year. This is the
the
third
last
year,
year?
yes, sir.
Okay.
So next year I'll put it out for bid.
Bid again.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This is the same company, Jared.
Jarrell, yes, sir.
Jared.
So we extending that contract to keep doing the work?
I'm sorry?
Are we extending that contract to keep on doing the work?
Yes, ma'am.
So how are they doing?
That was gonna be my question. I know
How,
we're here
how,
for the
how are they
approval,
keeping
but
the loans, how are they keeping the loans kept?
I
They
would
do.
say, I would say that they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I've been with them.
This was the first year that I even called the contractor to compliment on the mulch, because the mulch this year was a lot thicker and a lot better this year. So I think they're doing fine.
They've been with us for a while now.
Are you talking about your community or are we talking about all 6 communities?
I can only speak for my,
Okay.
And
Well,
John's
I
talking
do
about all
see-
6.
How?
And John's talking about all 6
they
communities.
do all 6, right?
Yes.
Well, I see them in those areas, but I'm just speaking for me, on observation. They are consistent with their work. I've talked to some of the people through the years, throughout the years. And they dedicate to the work, and very, vigilant on things that you ask them at times, when they go leave on reports and such not. They make sure they throw them off your porch. I've had conversation with them before. Yeah, I come here before, Jared.
Yeah, Brian, Southeastern Contracting,
Okay, well.
Brian Smith who's the contractor. on that.
Compared to them,
They're a lot better.
Jared is much better.
Yeah.
So, obviously, thumbs up with Jared.
And if we weren't happy with work, we wouldn't recommend an extension, we would automatically put it out.
Automatically put it out to bid.
Yeah, because it's not an automatic extension, it's just something that's
It's up to
available
us.
for
It
the
was a
contract.
part of, I believe a part of initial contract was it had those
3 years.
extensions built in, but we still had to come back to the board.
And the price would always stay the same for those 3 years.
Right, correct.
I would, when we renew or put the work out for bid with whomever we contract in the future, make sure we have a, it's documented as the standard of performance, what needs to be done. I would just follow that up with a cancellation provision, so that it's clear, this contract, unless I missed something, can't be canceled. Because there's no cancellation provision. If they don't do the work, then they could sue us for enforcement of the contract. And so, just get the lawyer to draft up and add a cancellation provision would be a suggestion. Lawyer says it's not necessary, then I'm, subject to being correct.
How long is the extension on the contract?
1 year.
Yeah. This is just for 1 more year, then we'll put it out for bid, and then we usually do a 3-year
3 years.
with,
So what's remaining with Jared?
this is his last year,
That's it.
yes. And then we'll put it out for bid again, and most likely the thing that happens, Mr. Dobson, is they get comfortable and then they'll come in with an astronomical price, and then somebody else will beat them. That's the pattern that I've seen.
Yeah.
They'll do it for 3 years at that set price, and then they'll think that, there's no way that they're gonna find somebody else, and then they'll boost up their price about 20, 30 grand. And that's why it's always different.
We take evaluation at that point.
Yeah, we send it out between the staff members and they do a
Right.
grading process.
Understand.
I like the idea of what Commissioner Kilgore said, to put in these contracts, a cancellation. Because they could get comfortable with being here for so many years, and they sidestep their job and not doing it, so you gotta give them a provision like anything else. So how would we go about doing that? We'll bring it to the lawyer, like you said, and put it.
I don't think we can do it with the current contract.
No.
Right.
It's already been executed.
And then with a provision for automatic renewal,
Right.
which is what we're triggering.
So we're looking
To start
for-
over, we'd have to renegotiate
Right.
and vote not to renew the annual and start over and bid it.
Right.
And
And we can, it will be less cumbersome and more effective to do it next year, it'll be automatic and work out for you.
exactly.
I think it's a good idea because it will offset what you just said. They might want to raise the prices and stuff like that. But with provisions in it, it will probably stay steady in what they're doing and be aware that.
We-
Okay, just-
He's talking about if they bid on it for the next time we put it out, they're gonna come in with a
Yeah.
much higher bid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Normally, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Normally.
Okay.
I'll entertain a motion about the law maintenance contract.
Let me ask this question. So if we're getting ready to bid to extend this contract, you can't make amendments to it?
I mean,
No, because it's an extension of the
The
previous
current- yeah,
contract.
Oh, okay.
contract.
It's an extension.
All right.
Can't breach it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Do you counsel with them on that? Not possibly changing their price or things like that?
They are
Can't do
not
that?
able to change the
No.
price during this contract. He's
No.
talking about next year when he puts it out for bid,
That's what
they'll
we do.
put in a bid
I
and it'll be
understand,
much
yeah, I
higher.
understand that. I'm just saying, do you talk, when you first sit down with them and put everything together, is that a part of the council or you just let them be?
No, they
They-
bid
they-
as according to what the job description is. And then see, if it's a construction bid, right, because this is a services bid, so it's almost like a request for proposals. So what happens is, you know, they'll give us a price, and then our staff members, we have 3 staff members that will go through and say, okay, if they got this, it gets evaluated. If they got their previous participation, they're the ones that grade it, and then at the end, I get the score sheet, and then I take their recommendation. I can't recommend anybody. The only time that I can negotiate is at a smaller contract, $15,000 or $20,000 contract. If I get a price from Huerta, then somebody else could, it's like, hey, he could do it, then I can negotiate at that time. But the big contracts, no, sir.
That's what I should have said, negotiate.
Yeah.
The scope and the amount of work is defined in the RFP that he sends out. And so John defines the job and the specifications, and then the bidder looks at that and determines how much they want to charge. And so that's where the negotiation takes place.
Yeah, good.
So next year, around this time, we'll be bidding out for
Yes,
a new
ma'am.
contract.
Next year at this time, you will be choosing a new contract.
Choosing.
And then we'll amend it. Okay, got it.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the lawn maintenance contract extension.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Nickerson, second by Commissioner Dobson. Approval of the lawn maintenance contract. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same. Passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item last time for my agenda is the write-off tenants accounts receivable classified as uncollectible as of February 28th, 2022. And this report shows, we were looking at a different report and found where there was some previous tenants that moved out back to 2021. I think there's one for 20. Yeah, there's one that was listed for 2009 that didn't get written off, so that's why this report looks a little larger than normal. But these residents have already left, they're no longer with us.
They're no longer with us.
But they weren't accounted when they left?
The whole process was followed except for actually bringing them before the board and writing them off and sending them to collections. The letters went to the residents, they're aware of the debt was posted. It just wasn't, there was a step missing on some of these that we just found out about, so this is why we're cleaning this up.
And let me ask you this, so this $5 late fee, am I correct that it starts in the next fiscal year, or does it start this month?
No, it starts, go ahead.
You're talking about adding or
$5
having them
bill.
removed?
Huh?
You're talking about having them removed,
Yes.
correct? Yes, they are being removed as we speak. They have already started being removed. The ones you see that are on here, even though it shows the move out date, they may have accumulated that fee prior to us saying, okay, we're not charging these fees anymore.
Right.
So this move out date that you see, these $5 late fees were accumulated prior to us removing them off the beginning of this year.
Was that during the COVID? And the CDC signatures?
No, they've always had the $5 late fees. Previously, always, if you paid after, if you hadn't paid your rent slabs or the 6, you started accumulating these $5 late. Yes.
I understand that, but I knew at one point we were, when the COVID was real bad, we were allowing people to move back in based on the CDC.
Well, they were allowed to make payment arrangements and things like that.
So it wasn't really,
But that has nothing to do with
oh,
these.
that has nothing to do, okay.
Yeah, these
That's-
$5 late fees,
Okay.
the ones that you see on there in a nutshell were prior, they just got to the point in
Okay.
the eviction process or whatever caused them to have to move out. So these were not recent. When you guys approved it back, I believe it was January, for us to remove them, we immediately started removing all of those off. So if you see those, they're not something that was added this month of this report,
Okay.
they're previous.
All right.
And of course, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing it correctly and I'm clear on it. These people did not make payment arrangements with us.
That's correct.
They just left or,
They,
Whatever.
yeah, they either just left or could have violated housing,
Mhm.
policies or police
Eviction
violations,
notices.
things, yes, you know, and so, no, it's not, these are not folks that are currently on
that's a
payment plans.
significant amount of dollars.
That's what I'm about to say, almost 60.
That's
Yes.
very simple. I was expecting it to be as the courts are coming along, but I wasn't expecting that amount.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're finding now that it's coming along, regretfully to have to say, we get a lot of folks that will come to the AMP site managers or the assistants and be, yeah, there's no way. So how long do I have to kick me out?
Wow.
Or we get to their annual process, and during that process of doing their annual paperwork, we run the check to see any unincome hasn't been reported. So a lot of folks we're catching now have been working for a significant amount of months, and now that we're doing their annual processing, that retro process
So all that was
starts.
added in.
It has to be added in, because it's failure to report.
Two
So-
questions, I'm sorry. Ms. Strickland, what step was missed? I want to go back to, I heard you say it was,
Sorry?
there was a step that was missed. Can we discuss that now? or-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a report that, is part of our monthly closeout that shows the tenants' accounts receivable. And somehow during all the COVID process, the focus went away from this report to other things, and we started looking at it again. I did an audit on it this month and saw all these old tenants that were already moved out that were still showing up on the report, so this is just a cleanup of that.
Second question is, I know we have some help with the financial literacy with the organization, I forget the name of it, with Mr. Tyner Roberts. Do we have a report on that? Anything going on with that?
I have not been able to get back in touch with her.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we approved something and we're not allowed to get in
We-
contact with her?
She, I don't think the board officially approved that.
Well, I wasn't here, but the first meeting I was in, they came in and we extended something. I think a contract where they can teach our
I'll have to go back and
residents.
see if the board officially.
Financial literacy.
I think there was
We couldn't
additional
force
act-
them, but
I
they-
think additional questions were asked or something, and
Yeah,
so.
I don't think we actually.
We didn't
approved
actually
her.
approve anything because we
Okay.
asked that we get a MOU for all further future projects that come through here before we decide which one we're gonna get.
Oh, I
Yeah,
Then
understand
we'll
that.
get
I thought
together.
it was already, I thought it was a flyer that went out or something that they could,
And we-
that the citizens or the residents could be a part of that workshop.
I
Okay, so I
think-
misunderstood.
My recollection is we just said, yeah, the program looks good. And they were in flux about the location and how they were going to administer the program. And they were to come back and we had offered, as I recall, that we might be able to provide space or whatever that had to be worked out with them. And so it was kind of like an encouragement, yeah, the program was good, could be beneficial, but all the final details weren't ironed out.
Okay.
and we.
I apologize.
That's okay. That's good. We've sent out the RFP for all the services, and we did send a copy of it to them as well. And I think the due date for that to come back is April 15 for us to start reviewing all the submissions.
I'm just passionate about, because I'm a Dave Ramsey representative, so I'm just really passionate.
Well,
I'm really
love Dave
passionate
Ramsey.
about educating individuals on finances. And this here is a pure example of not being educated in
On finances.
finances.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, we got to get some help to our residents.
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of help.
And just so you know, we took great pains and spent a lot of time
It was a very heated debate.
trying to minimize the adverse impact on our residents from the time that the virus was first identified, because we knew what was coming down the road. And with regard to the things that were just found, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sharon or Angie, when something like that's found, it's not that it's an error that it materially affects the financial statements. There are accounts receivable that are on the aging that may have not attracted the attention because, for all intents and purposes, the aging didn't matter anymore because there was no enforcement. And so the fact that they caught some minor amounts and have written them off now is simply a timing. It's not that the financial statements are wrong. It's just a timing issue between maybe it should have been written off 6 months ago or a year ago, but it didn't affect materially the financial statements.
Well, that wasn't the reason why I asked the question. I just wanted to have clarity. So cause I'm still learning. I'm still learning. I wasn't questioning the budget or how the financial statements came to it.
Yeah. On that financial was, I heard you say that's a lot of money people.
Yes.
Was court costs included in that?
Is what?
The court
The court
costs,
costs.
The
Were
warrant.
they included
the
in
court
that?
costs are only included in folks that were processed through an eviction.
Right.
So that's when the court cost gets applied.
So that didn't have no bearing on that?
Not, I mean, that's
Not much.
not compared to most of them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not much.
I will entertain a motion to write off Tennessee accounts receivable classified as uncollectible as of February 28th, 2022.
So moved.
I motion that we pass it.
Okay.
We approve it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
2022.
I'm not sure, I'm not sure which one of them.
I wrote
Actually,
down Dickerson.
Okay, so
Yeah, second. I said.
Madam Vice Chair Bailey, and seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same. That one passes unanimously. Do we have any reports from I'm sorry, you got it? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. Do we have any reports from committees? Commissioner items.
Commissioner Adams.
I brought it to the attention on, about the tenant. We discussed that.
Yes, and we can't discuss a tenant in open meeting.
Okay. That was all I had as of now, other than, trying to form get some more people involved. That's what basically I've been doing for the last month or so, for the residential council. So, other than that, that's the only item that I had, that I was concerned about at this time.
I think maybe it's appropriate we recognize our visitors. Okay, I'm sorry.
We're still, I wanted to go through that, because I do have something for Commissioner Tyler.
Okay.
I did want to have but does anyone else have anything under the Commissioner's items at this moment? Okay, have you guys had an opportunity to go through the annual plan? Commissioners? And you've got, so in our last meeting, it said we could, that we would have an opportunity to discuss it here at this meeting, or we could do it email or whatever. I think that's all it said in there. There was a couple of things, I'm gonna try to be quick, a couple of things in there that I wanted to make note of. Let's see, starting with page 1, item 7, it says site-based waiting list. Mr. Strickland, do we have a site-based waiting list? So that actually does not apply to us. Okay. Page 1, item 10, when it discusses the section 3, and it says here, and implementing procedures Act 24 CFR Part 135. I think that's a correction now because we are at final rule, which is now Part 75.
Okay.
And I will need some information on our Section 3 accomplishments, if you can get that information over to me as well. Just if we've had any section 3,
Not many.
okay.
The last contract that we had with a Section 3 contractor was back when we did the McIntyre door replacements.
I'm not gonna ask for that information as of right now.
Mhm.
Page 2, item 12, when it discusses the PHA will take appropriate affirmative action to award contracts to minority and women business enterprises under 24 CFR 5.105A. I saw that there. Now I think that was an older one, and I think that we need to take a look at additionally 24 CFR 92.351A and B, which is affirmative marketing and minority outreach program, as an addition to that portion. Let me see here. I'm just trying to. That's fine. When it under item, I guess that's page 2, item 19. When it discusses where the actual plan will be held, can we include an online version as well? Because right now it just says it's going to be in a print and it'll be held at the central office. We also need to make it available online. Section B2,
B2, it's a typographical error.
under new activities, this is more of a, I guess this is more of a question. Do we check the boxes? Because I know that at least that we've had our first presentation on repositioning, and there's a number of things here. Do we start checking the boxes for yes now so that we can make that decision for our ensuing year?
I think that we'll have to look at it and see.
So for, it says, Hope 6 or choice neighborhoods, mixed finance, modernization or development, demolition or disposition, designated housing for elderly and or disabled families, conversion of public housing to tenant-based assistance. I'm not gonna read them all, of course it's RAD. I do have a question eventually about occupancy by over-income families, and I think that has to do something with, again, mixed or deconcentration policy. And of course, occupancy by police officers, which I was reading on that portion in particular, and I think we definitely need to put that one in there because our police officers can live here, which since we have a lack of police officers with the police force, that will give them more presence on our properties. I believe you said something about typo here just a moment ago.
Yeah, B5, B5, 9-7, where it says, okay, progress report, section B5, where it says progress report, the sentence where it says, we are pleased to have been awarded 5 HUD vouchers and are working with the WVA facility to ensure the research reaches our local veterans in need. That should be our. And, the fiscal year. Is the fiscal year, are we working for fiscal year 2022 or 2023? Because it's 2023 on here.
2023, because this plan will start July 1st. This is
This
the plan
plan
for the
will
coming
start
up
July
July 1st, so it'll end in June 30th, 2023.
Okay, okay.
Are you done with that section?
Yeah.
I'm gonna move on to the statement of housing and needs. Statement of housing and needs and strategy for addressing housing needs. I've got it as page 61 of my PDF, but the pages weren't actually numbered. So within that, where's the assessment of fair housing that goes with this attachment? Do we have that? Because it wasn't, I didn't see, and I do have the printed one and I do have the electronic version, but I didn't actually see where we actually did the assessment for fair housing that actually would tell us what the needs for these, for our eligible populations are.
Okay, we'll have to go back and look.
Okay, and just to, you know, I won't even go so much into that. I'll just leave it at that. I'd like to see that actually assessment that we actually made. And that should help to clear up enough of more of these. When it says, however, under the section for increase in affordable housing properties in low poverty areas, where's that on that? Yeah. Increase awareness of BHA resources to aid and counsel families on locating properties outside of poverty concentrated areas and market the HCV program to owners outside of areas of poverty/minority concentrated areas. Is there a map that defines what those particular areas are?
Where are you at?
I'm on the statement, PHA plan elements, 24 CFR 903.7.
Yeah, if y'all could send us what your notes or whatever, if you have it in writing, if you made notes, it would help us to go back and find it and make any changes that we have.
Okay.
If that's possible. Thank you.
I just wanted to know if there was an actual map or something that you, and that maybe is a part of the assessment of fair housing that's not included in this document. That actually would outline what if we're gonna be marketing our HCV program to owners outside of areas of poverty and minority concentrated areas, I really wanna know what those poverty and minority concentrated areas are. Within the deconcentration policy, I'll need a little extra, and of course I'm gonna send all this to you as well.
Thank you.
What is it, step 5 there? I just didn't have an opportunity. I'll have to send that to you. There's something in there that says we can skip a family on the waiting list to reach another family in an effort to further the goals of deconcentration.
We haven't had a need to do that, but yes, you can do that.
We haven't had a need to do it, but we can do it.
Yes.
Okay. I'll appreciate a further explanation or an example of how.
Because our waiting list, we move through our waiting list so fast we get to everybody.
Okay.
So we don't have to skip over people.
Is it feasible for us to have a monthly report of how many empty units we have in the communities?
Yeah.
Because how many people are on the waiting list now for public housing?
Right now we have 14 vacancies in, do you know what it is?
It's gotta be somewhere. I wanna say somewhere around between 700 and 800. But keep in mind, a lot of those people on there, when you apply for public housing, you get a letter that's sent out to you saying, we got your application, these are the documents we need to attain from you. So we give them so many days to return those documents to us. If we don't get them the first time, we give them a final letter option to return those documents. Once that final letter has come out, if they don't return them by a specific date, then they go through the withdrawal process. So when you get people that apply, depending on for public housing, if they have preference, like their VAWA, you know, they're going, that was the number one. So you may apply, you know, yesterday and have VAWA, and you go closer to the top of the list to where somebody who has no preferences at all is still sitting on that list. So depending on the influx that comes in, you might be sitting a lot longer with no preferences than a month where we take a hit, where we just get a lot of applicants that have a emergency type, I don't wanna say emergency, but have a higher profiled situation such as VAWA that puts them in front of you.
Now, I seen on the website that the application was open on February the 21st. Is that
The
correct?
public housing application's always open. You can always come in and apply for public housing. It's section 8 that's not always open.
Right, and that, the section 8 was open February the 21st. I seen something similar to that I seen that on the website, but now it's taken down.
Yeah, the last time our section 8 program was, or waiting list was open was on December the 10th. We had it open for a couple hours, about like 600, just a hair over 600 applicants. So then we had to go and send them all applications because, you know, go through that whole process. So we've just gotten to where a lot of those that didn't respond are purged out of that waiting list and processing, getting documents back and forth from folks and so forth. So, but it's not back open yet again. So now that we've gotten that December the 10th process all cleaned up and applications processed and moving, now we can look at opening it up again here soon.
Yeah, I'd like to know how many units we monthly add that to the agenda.
Now that's for section 8 vouchers or public housing?
Both. And for next month, can we put the website on the agenda for next month, please?
What about it?
What about it?
Yeah,
The calendar, well, it's several things about it.
okay, cause we're going through a website update right now.
Yeah, we've been doing that for a while, but the calendar is not up to date. It's still 2021. And yeah, it's just some other things. I'll let you know once we have that on, add that on the agenda next
Okay,
month.
well, it would just help us be more prepared if we knew what the discussion would be.
I'll let you know next month.
Okay.
Any other items at this point we have as far as commissioners are concerned? Just to be clear, the annual plan's public hearing is March 30, is that correct?
I believe so.
That we put down? And that's gonna be held here, in this office?
Yes.
And I believe it's what, 3 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay, and that's when we will engage with the further public about any additional amendments or changes that we need to make if it's at that point from anyone else in the public realm for the annual plan. Now, when's the annual plan need to be submitted to
We
HUD?
would need approval at the April board meeting.
At the April
board.
board meeting. And that's, and April's board meeting date is approximately what, the 9th as well?
No, it's
8th?
later in April, 13th.
13th? So it's gonna give us about 2 weeks to get everything squared away from the public hearing.
And what date is the annual plan? We can be a part of it, right?
It's a
March
public
30th.
hearing.
Yes, 100%.
March 30th, okay. I wanna be there.
It is encouraged that we're here, at least in the capacity to answer questions or to support staff.
The annual plan. Okay.
Yes,
And you
It'll be
said
in the
at 3
same room
o'clock?
here.
yes.
At 3 o'clock at here, okay. I'll be here.
And just to be clear, if anyone else wants to have input for the annual plan at this point, all they have to do is contact you, Ms. Strickland, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is there anything else? I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
I second that motion.
I got 2 seconds. Kilgore, and I'm gonna give it to Dobson. I think he just got it just. So to adjourn, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those have the same.
We're
Motion
gonna
passes.
recognize these very patient people at the back of the room.
I have not recognized them. You want to stand and introduce yourselves, please?
I'm LaShonda Huff. I stay in Brooklyn Homes. And I just heard about these meetings actually, and I was curious. It's been very informative.
How do we do?
Well, I've been to other meetings, and I think you guys did all the work, you know. You weren't arguing or like that and stuff, so.
We'll get to that.
That's today.
And we have Zach Lyde here too.
Yeah, I mean, he was my normal, so I'm pretty good.
Hi, my name is Allison Jordan. I'm also a Brooklyn Homes resident. And I was just like coming for support of her, and she's my best friend. But it was very interesting to hear the topics that was discussed. Because we are always like talking about stuff, reading about stuff, trying to find more. And I think we're gonna try that council thing. Yeah.
What, the resident council?
Yeah, the resident council.
We need you. It sounds good.
It sounds like a plan.
Yeah, because it's your voice
Mm-hmm.
that we need to hear of the things that's going down. You heard about the maintenance contract, so
Yeah.
if you see.
I know you saw our facial expressions because some stuff that you were saying, yeah, we looking like, really? No.
Right. And so we're here to educate you, inform you, and have you come actively engaged in your community of how you want to see, how you want to live, and how you want your community to look. And
Your
so
voice.
you're welcome
Your
here
voice.
every month. We have these meetings second Wednesday of the month at 9 o'clock. You're welcome to come and bring others. And if you ever want to say anything, be on the agenda, or say your interest in being a resident council, just let the chair know and Ms. Strickland, and we'll put you on the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
We did already vote to adjourn.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted. Okay.
Time for sushi.
Commissioner Dobson. Crazy. It has been absolutely, it's been insane.
So you know,
We'll just get the challenge.